Hello and welcome to another Beard Clipper video. If you're not yet a subscriber and you are enjoying my content, please do consider clicking that button and subscribing. It's awesome to see how many of you are doing so. And don't forget to ding the bell and select all so that whenever one of my videos goes live, which is usually 3 times a week, YouTube will bother to tell you, because otherwise it won't and you will miss them, which would be a sad thing, wouldn't it? So, this video is one I'm particularly stoked about making. I'm very excited about the build. Let me explain a little bit more about it. Every couple of months at the moment, because of COVID, it's slowed down. Ryan on Tabletop Crafters United is setting the members of the Discord group a challenge, a build challenge, and we've just started one which is running August to September. The challenge has actually stretched me quite a lot. I didn't expect it to. It's one that totally takes me out of my comfort zone, because it is make a terrain piece based on some concept art. Now, concept art is not normally how I work. I normally work either from pure imagination or using textual sources. I don't normally use graphical sources to inform my work. And so this has been quite difficult. I had ages ago, well before I started this channel, an idea for a video I was going to film and give to Top Table Gaming as community content. But that was based on some amazing concept art. But it was a huge build, and I thought about it, discussed it with Angela, and immediately we rejected the idea because, yeah, it would just be crazy, and I'm trying to limit the scope of my builds at the moment so that I'm not overwhelming myself. So I asked Angela to come up with an idea, and what a great idea that was for me to have, because she has found the most perfect concept art, and I'm really excited to make it. So what I'll do is I'll go to voiceover, I'll show you the image, we'll talk about it briefly, and then we'll get on with the build. So I hope you're as excited as I am, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this turns out. What you see in front of you is the concept art which Angela chose for me for this challenge. And as soon as I saw it, I just knew I had to use that one. It's absolutely brilliant. I love the way the light is, and I love the slightly monochrome colour. It's just a beautiful picture, and I'm really looking forward to trying to translate this into a 3D, which is going to be quite a challenge. But hey, nothing worth doing is ever easy, or most things worth doing aren't easy. The artist is John Howe. I will be popping his name on the screen as well while this picture's up, because I do like to accredit correctly. And the way that I'm going to achieve this is without using water effects. I'm going to attempt to do it just with textures and colours. I'm not entirely sure how, but that is what I'd like to do. So let's get over to the workbench. I'll show you the materials and the base that I've chosen, and I will get this started. I've got 2 months to do this, so as long as I go at this nice and steadily, I should achieve my goals. But I really love this picture, and I cannot wait to get stuck in. These are the bases that I'm selecting between for this challenge. I bought these from Jumbo, which is like a full of rubbish shop. Amazing, love it. Full of tat. That is awesome for use on for modelling. And they are 3D or deep base picture frames. Now, I used one of these previously to do the display for Rosie's wall for our first holiday to Thassos, and it's still hanging on her wall, and it's brilliant. It's got stones and shells that I picked up off the beach there, and that's the sort of thing that this is purpose for. As you can see, it's got these funky little pictures and clips and what have you. That's how it's supposed to be for. However, I'll be taking that all apart and building up this diorama on this base. I don't know which size I'm going to do yet. I'm going to do a little bit more planning, going to get my pencil and paper out to start doing some drawing and work out some rough dimensions, but either one of those will work perfectly. So that's what I'm going to use as a base. This will then mean that I can actually put this on the wall quite nicely. I can even hang it so that it's maybe sticking out from the wall. I could do all sorts of different ideas. I'm not sure. I could potentially take 2 of these, attach them. There's all sorts of ideas I've got at the moment which I need to pursue and come up with the best solution. So yeah, this is, as you can probably tell from my voice, this is really enthusing me, and I'm really looking forward to solving all these questions and coming up with something amazing. I'll be doing some planning, I'll be doing some looking, and I've been studying some images online, and I've been working out which one of these two frames I want to use for this diorama. So what I'll do now is I will flick up on screen a still from the film which I found on Google Images, which gives a bit of an idea about just how wide Durin's door was, not as wide as I thought, when scaled up against Gandalf. So you can see right in the middle there's Gandalf stood looking at the moonlit runes and working out how to say friend in Elvish. And here you can see I have a 28mm miniature from the Mines of Moria box set of Gandalf. A little bit of a wonky staff, but yeah. And I'm looking at which width is going to work best. So I can put him there, and the doorway is about yay wide, which would give space either side for the holly trees to come up. Excuse me. Or I can put him here, and the door yay wide, which will mean that the holly bushes will be right on the corner. Now if we flick back to look at the concept art that I'm working from, you can see that the concept art does have a bit of space on either side where you've got the rock face and the door, and then just the holly bushes is not actually going to be sufficient to actually recreate the display, which is a bit annoying because this is a bit much bigger frame. What I would prefer is to have one that's that wide and only so deep, because this is going to have a lot of the lake in it, but then that's pretty cool as well. So what I think I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using the bigger one, which is, as I say, not what I expected. I thought that this would be enough, but having studied those source images, I'm going to be using the bigger one, and we're going to be building it in this direction. Now I know I could, of course, do that, but then the lake is going to be very short, and if we flick back again to the source image, what I think is that that watcher is quite a way out out of shore. So looking at the actual frame that I'm going to be building, I think that the watcher is going to be sitting somewhere around here. So on reflection, this is definitely the correct size of board. So I'm going to open it up, I'm going to pull all of the stuff that I don't need out of the way, get rid of it, and then we'll get started with looking at how we're going to build the cliff face, how tall I'm going to make it, and how I'm going to do that doorway. And I have got a plan for that, which I will show you in a second. I've just had a wonderful idea, and my friend had the same idea at the same time and suggested it to me, but I was already looking. But it will delay this build slightly because I've just ordered from Amazon, and that will arrive in the next week or two, but maybe I'll be able to work on the earlier stuff before it arrives, because what I've done is I've ordered a black light torch and some UV paint, which is going to mean that I can make this glow, which is going to be amazing. So anyway, very excited about that. What I'm doing now is I'm starting to plot out the layout and where each of the elements is going to go. So at the back, we're going to have the stone shelf with the two trees, which I will sculpt in. We'll have a cliff coming up, and then the doorway will be dead center here. As we come further this way, let me move this a little bit more, we will have the watcher. And I bought these ages ago. These are polystyrene balls, very useful. And if I shave the bottom third or so off, then that will sit very nicely and will look like the watcher's head just poking out of the water. And I will then be able to sculpt in around it, not entirely sure what with, and we'll be able to do the water around it coming up towards the bank and to the cliff. So the way that I'm going to approach this is I'm going to do the cliff first, I'm going to do the bank, have it sloping down into the water because it does, and work out how I'm going to do the trees. I have some ideas on how I'm going to do that, but I need to do a little bit of experimentation and work on it. So the first thing to do is get my pencil, which I have here, move these things out of the way, and start drawing. So let's do this. So the shape of the bank, let's make sure that we do this so that we can have a Gandalf sat in front of the doorway if we wish. We're probably going to be having taking up a fair bit of the back with a cliff face. So let's presume that we'll be coming out 40 mil from the end potentially. There we are. Let's get a shorter ruler so I can draw in there. Right, I'm back with a shorter ruler. That'll help. So if we think that that's roughly where the cliff face is going to be, not that it'll be straight, but it's good enough that we can see what's going on. What we then need to have is Gandalf needs to be able to stand about there. The more I'm looking at this, the more I'm thinking I made the right choice in terms of which base to use. So Gandalf needs to be able to stand back here, and that means that the water probably is going to be wanting to come up to around here. That's probably where we want to be having the water approach. It is close, but it's not so close that there's not room for them to move. So that means that if that's going to be the case with the bank, the doorway is about 3 Gandalfs wide. So his base is 25 mil, obviously. So 3 of them is 7.5 centimeters. So if we find the center of this, let's find the center. This is 32 centimeters wide, this thing. So if we dot down at the 16, that's the center. Just mark that nice and clearly. Then if we're going for a 7.5 centimeter wide door, let's call it 8 centimeters for the sake of it, then the doorway is going to be there to there. That's good. And that means that we will have the roots and the tree will be here and here, with the roots coming in down towards the water. My excellent sketching. So that's how that will look. Let me zoom in a little bit so that you can see a bit better, because the contrast isn't great from that distance. There we are. I think you can see that a little bit better. So what will happen is, there's Gandalf stood in front of the gates. The gates are going to be here. We're going to have the holly bushes coming up here with the roots going down into the water, and the water will be lapping up around to that level. So that gives me a good idea of what kind of materials I need. Not very much. So the next thing to do is going to be to put this rocky slope in, and I'll do that with XPS. I'll fill that with XPS. I might even do most of the base here where the water is with a thin, I've got some 1 centimeter blue foam which might be able to fill that in a bit so that I don't have to use quite so much more expensive material. So yeah, so that's what I might do first, is fill this with the foam, and then 1 centimeter up to the edge of where I want the water to be, and then transfer this onto it, and then start to sculpt in the bank. So I'll get that done. I'll bring you along for that. A little bit of nattering in that, quite a long clip of talking, but I think that explains my plans. So let's get stuck in with some making now. Right, so I have my 1 centimeter foam, and I have my measure so that I can cut this to size. So in terms of the width, we want it to be 293 mil. 293. I'm not normally a fan of attempting to cut things to that accuracy, to be honest, but we'll give it a go. I'm not normally that accurate at all. So that's 293, and then that's 293 up that end as well. There we are. So let's draw that line in and then cut that. So that should fit in nicely, he says. It doesn't. Oh, it does. Look at that. That's like a glove. Right, so how long do we want it? And then we'll glue that in place. So it's going to be 492. This is so not my usual style. Normally it's like, yeah, it's about. Absolutely perfect. That's going to slot in very, very nicely. So what I'm going to do now, I won't do this on camera. I will transfer over my little sketch here onto the top of this so that I have the same dimensions that I've just worked out, and then I will probably just use PVA. I might go for the Gorilla Glue to stick this down, and I'll weight it. But yeah, I'll bring you along for the gluing, but I'm just going to now transfer over this design onto the top of that. Serendipitously, I love that word, this offcut of the blue foam actually sits almost exactly to where I would like to have that, the water coming up over. So what I'm going to do before I stick this into here is I'm actually going to cut this down to size for width and stick it on, and that will then mean I can then shave it down a bit, or even not, because I might actually end up doing another depth of the blue foam over the top. So I might actually cut another one of these to go underneath it of the same height. That will then mean that this sits nicely at just below the level of the surround, and then this can sit on top and just be the rise that's going to be coming out of the water. So so yeah, I'm gonna do a little bit more of a playing around with my blue foam before I do any sticking, and we'll make sure that what I have, because the rise is not very far, it's a very, very small rise. It's only a foot or two above the level of the lake that the gate is, so it doesn't need to come up that far. So yeah, so I'm going to have a bit of a play around. I might end up, as I say, laminating 2 of these 1 centimetre sheets together just to fill this area a little bit better. It's a very flat lake. So yeah, let's see what happens. I'll bring you back in and show you how that looks when it's done. Right, we've got our sections cut. So I'm going to glue these down. I am going to use Gorilla Glue, I've decided, Gator Glue, sorry, because why not? I've got it and it's going to be stronger. So what we'll do is we'll put some Gator Glue down on the base, which will just mean that it will be nice and strong. There we are, like that. And then we'll press it in. I don't know whether I'll keep this sound or not, because this might sound very nasty. Yeah, it didn't sound too bad at all, did it? There we are. And then what we can do is we can put the next layer on, and as you can see that now, as long as I can pull it back out again, but that is actually now a very nice base level layer, there we are, to build the terrain on top of and do some scenicking. So and now we will get weights, lots of weights, and we will put that down. First of all, we'll put the lid on the glue, actually. There we are. Lots of weights, I have lots of weights. I get so much exercise, but these weights always get used just for weighting down terrain. So plenty of weights there. And then we have these weights as well, which will sit in nicely like that. So that is going to be really secure. So I'll let that to dry. It's dinner time now, so I'll go and have my dinner, and when I come back that will be ready to work on with the next stage. Excellent. This didn't happen last night. I was busy with Rosie time, and then I was doing some editing for the vlog because it's now Sunday morning. Talking a bit quietly because bad night for Rosie last night and Angela, so they're both still asleep, so I'm letting them have a nice long lie-in, and I'm going to get a few bits and pieces done this morning. First of all is going to be taking this off and checking that this has now dried nicely. So let's remove all these weights. Yeah. So that has done very well, and it hasn't even broken the back, which is good. So the next thing I'm going to be looking at doing is building this area here. I'm not going to work on the water until I've finished doing the terrain, or at least working out the terrain at this end. So I'm going to be looking at the cliff, sculpting in the trees. So I'll gather together the materials. I'm not sure when I'm going to start that, probably not straight away, but I'll gather the materials, do some planning, and bring you along for the next step as soon as I start. I spent a bit of time thinking about this, and I've worked out my next step. The next step is to put a backboard on. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to put this is a sheet of MDF, which you can't see very well because of how bad my light is at the moment here. So I'll turn it around. It's a sheet of MDF. which is going to be stuck on the back here behind the rise, and I'm going to put some more 1 centimetre blue foam on the front of it. So what I'm going to need to do here, and I might do this off camera because it's a bit awkward, is I'm going to mark on here how high up the back of this comes. So I'll draw a line across there, and then I'll take this board and I'll cut some blue foam so that it will stick onto this backboard entirely without any overhangs, and then I'll come along and I'll stick that on with a bead of the Gorilla Glue or Gator Glue at the bottom here and on the bottom of the blue foam. And that then should make it so that it's quite nice. What that will do is it will make it a little bit more hard wearing, but it'll also give me a nice solid strong structure onto which I can sculpt the trees and attach the door and all those other good things that's going to go on for this Gates of Moria Durin's door. So I'm quite looking forward to that, and I think this is going to be the next step. So I will get this done and I will show you it once I've marked it and I'm about to glue it in place. So let's get that done. I have put the Gator Glue and have glued the board to the back of this XPS, as you can see, and I've got the lip. And I thought I'd bring you along for the next stage to show you how I'm going to go about doing this. And I might do most of this off camera, but I did think that you might be interested. It might be quite nice to see how this works. Let me just get the light right. Yeah. So what I have is I have these 90-degree shapes. These are actually designed for the purpose I'm using them for, which is very unusual. I don't normally use things for what they're designed for. And what these are designed to do is to make sure that what you're assembling is actually at 90 degrees. So what you do is you clamp the 90-degree set square to your board, and then you can then put pressure on or put a weight on, and you know that it's not going to tip forwards and it's going to stay at the right angle. So I will get some clamps and I will clamp this in place, and you can do this probably most easily by using a clamp like this if you can get it to hold. Let me just do that very quickly. It's a bit difficult at this angle. I'll probably stop filming actually. I'll tell you what, I'm going to get this clamped and then I'll bring you back to show you what it looks like, because I need to move around and I'll get in the way of the camera. There we are, that's now clamped in and glued, and as you can see we have a clamp here. I could actually probably put one more over on this side if I wanted to, but it's held quite nicely, it's quite firm, and I've clamped it down at the front here as well and at the back there. So I'll leave that to dry. I've put or to go off even, I've put the Gator Glue on, so that should be quite solid. And when that's done, I'll then be able to start texturing and building up and sculpturing in this area. Let's just grab our friendly Gandalf and make sure that we still have space. Yes, we do. He is going to be able to stand very nicely in front of that doorway and to command it to open by saying friend. Melon, as you all know. As you can see, I actually changed up the right angles that I used on this. I made use of a small metal one here, a larger metal one in the middle, and then this plastic one at the back. The plastic one only because I bought it thinking it was huge, because it wasn't cheap. And then when it arrived, it was almost comedy how small it was. So I've made use of it now, so I don't feel quite so bad, feel like it's a waste. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these weights and the clamps and make sure that it's actually glued in. I've not yet done this, so you'll be watching me find out that it hasn't worked if it hasn't worked, because I've not checked. So let's remove these and see what happens. Right, that is not very stable at all. So what I'm going to need to do is make that more stable. And I think the way to do that is going to be to run a bead of the glue along the front and then let that to go off overnight. So I'm not entirely sure why that hasn't worked very well. Looking at it, it is glued. I can see the glue in there dried. It just hasn't sat down as low as it should have done. I think that's what the problem is. So what I'm going to do is get, as I say, the Gator Glue and run that in there along that edge so that it rolls inside, and then that will hopefully make it a little more stable so that I can start to work on the actual. You can see just how wibbly wobbly that is. It's not good enough, that really. So I'll get that done now and I'll bring you back for the next stage when that is dry. It's a few days later than I expected to look at this after the terrible hard drive crash that I had last week, which will date when I'm filming this, if you're not watching it on the vlog. But anyway, as you can see back here, the extra foam has reinforced that certainly enough, and when I put all the rest of the building, so it'll have like all sorts of extra layers on it, that will be really, really strong. Someone suggested very usefully in the vlog that I use a skewer. However, it's only very, very thin foam, so that probably wouldn't have worked very well for this, but it is something I would normally do, is use cocktail sticks or something for rigidity and structural integrity, but that wasn't possible in this case. What I've also done is printed out the image that I found of the door, as you can see, and I printed it out 6 centimeters wide, and that's how wide this door is going to be when it's on diorama, and it looks absolutely perfect. I'm very, very pleased with it indeed. I don't happen to have my Gandalf up with me anymore because I've done a bit of tidying, but yeah, trust me, it looks really good with the Gandalf in front of it. So now what I'm going to be doing, 2 tasks I've got to do now. First of all, I'm just going to clean up the overspill from the gator glue, which is going to get in the way, and then I'm going to print another couple of these because that worked quite nicely. I've got to work out how I'm going to actually go about doing this, and I've got a couple of ideas that have come to me, and maybe more will come to me while I'm actually doing the work, but if that's the case, then I will just bring you along for all of them. But one of the ideas is that I get some of this blue foam and I stick this to it and then draw through it with a very sharp knife or with a sculpting tool. Another one is using air drying clay in the same way, so put this over the top, make it an air drying clay. Ultimately, I am certainly not competent to do that, and I don't know even if I'm going to be able to do my ideas, because if you see, you've got this amazing writing. So it might even be that I print it out onto a transparency, but I'll need to buy printable transparencies for that, and just stick that on, because behind it is going to be my glow-in-the-dark paint, and so I'm not going to be able to paint that over the top of this because it will just obscure it. It's very, very opaque, the glow-in-the-dark paint. So there's a couple of options, a couple of ideas which I'm going to be cracking through, but first of all I'm going to get a sharp knife and just clear up all this overspill, and then I'm going to start working on this. Once I've got that and I know what the material is going to be that I'm going to use for it, I can then do the rest of the scenicking and then start to think about the water. But the most important thing is that. The most important thing is getting that right, because that is the key element of this scene. It's time for an experiment, and I'm quite excited about this. So the bright aqua glow-in-the-dark paint arrived, which arrived really quickly. I was very, very pleased, and I have had a little bit of a play with it, just shining a black torch on it in the actual pot. However, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a bit of a try and see just what it looks like when I paint it directly with this white paper, and then charge it up with some black light. So you can see that I haven't opened this yet, because I'm going to peel the wrapper off. There we are. And I will now apply that over the top. Give it a stir. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so I've got myself a cocktail stick so I can stir it. Yeah, that's very thick. Look at that. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to apply that on this paper. The 2 things that I want to see are, first of all, just how opaque it is, how much it covers up the black, and secondly, if when I paint it on so that it doesn't cover up the black too much, how well it glows. Because the simplest solution for the problem I've got is to print this out on paper and stick it on and paint it for colour and what have you, so potentially like this. The second simplest is to find a transparency and make the rock, paint the glow paint on, and then after that stick the transparency over the top. And I am going to be trying to find some transparencies that I can paint onto or I might even find someone who will be able to paint it for me. But the first impressions of this is I am painting this on quite thickly, as you can see, and it is actually still maintaining the visibility of the ink underneath. So if I can potentially get this to work, problem is, like I say, is the colour of the rock. It needs to be a rock type face here. So sticking a transparency over the top of some rock that I've painted in my usual rock way will look much more realistic. However, this is all an experiment, and that's why I'm showing this to you, so you can see the steps that I'm going through for this build. So it says it will take between half an hour and 3 hours to dry, and it also says that it's a good way of teaching kids how to wash their hands, because you wash your hands, you think you've got it off, you go to bed and you'll notice that your hands are glowing. So there we are, we'll find out if that's the case. There we are, so I've painted that over the entirety of the shape. There we are, good. Scrape that unused back into the pot because I am that tight. And then close the pot over carefully. Good, there we are. So what I'll do is I'll leave that to dry and see how opaque it dries. But what I'm also going to do now, before it's dried, because I can do it right away, is I'm going to grab the black light torch, I'm going to shine the black light torch on it, and I'm going to turn all the lights off, and I'm going to let you join me for this. So I will gather that all together, wash this brush first of all, and I'll be back very shortly. Here we are then. I have my black light torch, and I am going to shine that on this just for a few seconds, as you can see. So just wait for that to get to 20 seconds on the clip. There we are. And what I'm now going to do is reach over and turn this light off, and let's see what happens. Oh, look at that! It works! That is seriously cool. So if I now put this to black light again and charge it a little bit more, maybe until we get to the minute mark on the clip. That is amazing. Isn't that amazing? That is amazing. So just another 10 seconds or so, and then we will turn the torch off and watch that glow effect again. It says it can last for 24 hours. If you charge it up fully, I can tell you what, that is stunning. That is beautiful. So there we are. So I'm pleased about that as an experiment. I will now have to find out whether I can get a different media to print onto. I'll see how opaque that dries, and I'm sure I'll bring you along for that when I get to that. I've not done as much on this as I expected to this week because I've been busy with other things. Just haven't really had the time to do as much hobbying as I normally would like, but that's fine. I have, however, got to print out some different sizes of the gateways. I was looking at the picture, which I will flash up on screen now, and what you can see there is that the door is actually a lot smaller. If I set my little Gandalf here and I put him on this one, and you notice that I'm setting him a little bit below where the lintel is. And we'll now put the other picture on the screen as well, and what you'll see is that the top of his hat here is where the trees are. However, in the picture, the top of his hat is about in that position. So what I did was, as I say, I printed these out in different sizes, 9 centimeters, 7 centimeters high, 6, 5.5 and 5, and I think that 6 looks like it matches about correctly. So that's cool. So I can now practice. You can see it's a lot smaller. This is the size that I did my test with the luminous paint on, and that was much bigger. That's 50% larger, from 9 centimeters down to 6. So it's going to be a little bit more detail, a little more fiddly, but also the actual where the glow is not all the way through all of the columns and everything. It is just on the very edges, so it's going to be a slightly more difficult painting task, but maybe slightly easier because I struggle to get it to be smooth. But if I'm just looking at doing a line, I can maybe stipple that on in maybe 2 or 3 applications and then get that done right. I have 1 month left to ship this, and I haven't really done very much for the past 10 days, so I need to start focusing. And next month I have another massive project on, so it's going to be an interesting month. I may have bitten off more than I can chew, but whatever, that's when I sometimes excel. So what I'm going to do next for this project is cut some of these out as squares and do what I said I was going to do a week ago, which is put them onto different media and work out how I'm going to best get this actually to look like rock. Because yeah, white paper, I'm going to struggle, I think. So anyway, an interesting exercise, and I'm pleased with what I've learned. I have not been idle on this build, even though it's been a little while since the last update. I have been practicing and testing out some techniques. The biggest thing that concerns me, I'm pretty happy with everything else I've got to do for this, but the biggest thing that concerns me is obviously the doorway. Now that's pretty small, it's a tiny thing, and particularly with the writing and what have you, it's very, very fine. But never mind the writing I'll just have to kind of fudge. The actual structure's hard enough, the actual large lines are hard enough for me to conceptualise how I was going to carve it and how I was going to transfer it over to foam. So I've tried a couple of different techniques, and I think that I've found the answer, which I'm going to show you my test piece, and then I'm going to do the actual process again. The test piece involves taking the picture that I've printed out and PVA gluing it to some of this foam. Now the good thing with this is that PVA doesn't really stick very well, but it sticks well enough for my purposes, so it's not gonna, the paper's not going to stay on it. As you can see, that's been peeled off. So I'll stick that to the foam, and then when that's done, I've got a very fine knife. I tried it with a sculpting tool and it just doesn't cut the paper enough. This is still going to be another practice piece, by the way, because I want one more try, but I just wanted to show you what I was doing. And then once that's glued down, I take a knife, so an X-Acto blade, and very, very carefully and with a lot of patience, I cut along the edges and the lines that I want to have. And if you can see, that has actually transferred pretty well into there. And the next thing I can do is with a sculpting blade of some shape, that one looks pretty good, quite a wide flat one, I can then widen those lines quite easily, and you can see doing this, let me just get into better shot. You can see that I can then widen these lines quite nicely and get quite a strong carving, which particularly when we've applied some paint and dry brush it, will give quite a good kind of like, that's the, yeah, I'm not going to do too much of it because this is just a test piece, but you can see just how easily that's going to mean that I transfer that over to the foam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this down now. So I've got my PVA, so what I'll do is I will apply a generous amount, but not too much. I didn't put my lid on my glue and it dried, what an idiot. There we are. So put some PVA glue and then just spread that around, and the important thing is that the PVA does cover the whole area that you want to have your paper is, because that one didn't quite, and it was a little bit annoying where it was lifting. So put a lot of PVA on, more than you think. In this case I don't normally do that. Apply your paper like so, and then what I will do is I have these heavy metal what's-its and I'll weight it down like so. So there we are. I'll let that dry and I'll bring you back for the next step. I'm now going to attempt, and I don't know whether this is going to be my final attempt or not, but I'm now going to attempt to do the best job I've done so far of following these guidelines using my very, very sharp, as you see, brand new, very sharp blade on this X-Acto knife and attempting to carve out this shape for the door. I'm going to leave the camera running. I don't know how long it's going to last or what the battery's going to be like, but I'll pop some music on and you can watch as much as it goes. I'm just going to do this really, really steadily. I need to be really, really patient. So yeah, here goes. Let's see how well I manage to follow this design and punch it through into the foam below. the next night, and I'm now going to make use of this sculpting tool that you can see here to follow through on the things that I marked through, so to widen the marks that I made with the X-Acto blade. So once again, I will turn the microphone off, and you can watch as I with some music, and I'm just going to crack on with this and watch some YouTube videos myself. This is one very, very happy, excited beard because that worked perfectly. Look at that, that is absolutely spot on for what I need to do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stick that here to this backboard in the middle. And I'm going to actually wedge it a little bit up because there's some steps that go in front of it which lead up to it, so that's why it's slightly raised above the ground. So I'm just going to glue it in place there, which will obviously then, let's get that a bit better, there we are, which I will then need to weight, so I'll probably just press against it with something. And when that's done, then I can start to do the sculpting, so I can start to do the rest of the rock, and I can put the trees in place, which obviously is the bit that I'm nervous about after this. This is quite a stretch for me, this build, but that's exciting, but also it's going to really start to make the whole diorama come together, and I am going to work forwards from the back and then do the the water last. So we'll get the rock and the cliffs, and we'll get the trees, and then when we're doing that, we'll be able to start coming down over the bank, and the roots reach into the water a little bit, and then when that's done, then we'll be able to start building the water up. So I'm only going to use PVA glue for this, so let's just get some PVA, put a dollop on, get a brush, spread that out smoothly and thinly, and then put it in place, and then we'll leave that overnight, and I'll be back to this as soon as possible to do the next step. So that will go roughly in the middle, like so, and I will weight that in place with something not too heavy. So how about that? There we are. So that will just hold that in place so that it doesn't move, and now I'll be back to that as soon as possible to do the next step. Next step on this is going to be to use some of Luke's modelling compound to build up the rock surface and then cover over the bank. And when that's dried and looks like rocks, then I will start to look at doing the trees. So we really are cracking forward on this now. The hesitation or the experimentation around the doorway has been very successful. Obviously I'm very, very pleased. It gives me the scope of how I'm going to be how thick I'm going to be making this, and with this going on as well, it will actually add some more structural integrity to the back. So I'll leave the camera running, I won't natter too much, and you can watch how I do this. Now you can see I'm just mixing this up to a consistency that I like, and then we'll just smudge it on and smooth it out and make it into a rock surface, in front of which, of course, there will be trees. So anyway, it's enough muttering. Onwards. Back a couple of days later, and I'm going to do the rest of the sculpting modelling compound. Going to come away from the edge of the cliff face and down to and into the water. And also I'm going to finish off doing the sides. I did a little bit on this side, but I'll do that side as well, just to finish it all off. And then what I'll be able to do is start on the holly bushes, which, yeah, I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but we'll see. So I will again pop some music on and show you some of this, and I might just stop if it gets a bit boring, because it's basically the same thing. What I'm doing is making myself some modelling compound, so a little bit out of the pot there, and then add some water, mix it up, and then slap it on. It's an agricultural process. You don't really need to be too precise, because if you screw up and you put too much water in, you add a bit more sculptor mould, and if you don't have enough water, you drip a little bit more in. So yeah, I'll get that done, and I will show you what it looks like, or bring you in for the next process probably. Won't bother coming back. I'll bring you in for the next process when it's finished. Now we come to another interesting bit on this build. This build is really stretching me. I'm having to do a lot of new stuff, like doing the doorway, and now we're going to come to the holly bushes. Now I've been sat here the entire time looking at this, thinking that the holly bushes were flush, so they'd actually grown up almost like ivy and were crawling up the cliff face. And it's only just now I'm really starting to dig into it that I've looked deeply, and I've realised that's just not the case. That's not what they are. They actually are growing somewhere out around here, and then they grow up and over above the doorway, and they might touch the cliff face, but they don't really touch it very much. So this means this does two things. First of all, I'm going to have to rethink the thoughts I had about just using air drying clay to sculpt on the tree, and secondly, I might have to actually paint this at least basically before I do the trees, so that I can get in and not damage any of the structure I do for the trees. But what I'm going to talk about now is my thoughts about how I'm going to do the trunk and the tree. And there have been a couple, and I've done a couple of revisions which I'll show you. First of all, I thought, you know what, let's just use some toilet rolls. But looking at it and looking at the proportions on my concept art that I'm building against, that's probably a bit thick, and the same goes for the kitchen rolls. They're the same dimensions and they're probably a bit thick. So what I then come down to is this, which is a smaller toilet kitchen roll. I think that might actually be from inside, like a cling film or something like that, I'm not sure. And the final remaining large dowel, which is a pain because I meant to order more of this and I forgot. So I would have used that. That would have probably been just about perfect, I think. So what I might do is do one with a dowel and one with this thin tube. And what I can do for that is I'll be able to bed them in. So put a little mound around it and stick them in with that, maybe with some PVA on the bottom. Once I've cut them to size, obviously, because they're not going to want to be that big, I'm going to want to bring them up and then they're going to start branching out. Probably just above the doorway, looking at the concept art, so just around the doorway they're going to start branching out, and they won't need to be as long. So I could probably cut this in half and have half and half, but I quite like the idea of having slightly different sizes. And then I'll be able to bed them in with the mound of either Luke's modelling compound or air drying clay, and then do the sculpting of the roots and of the branches from there. The other thing that I'm probably going to end up doing is actually building the branches, building these when they're not actually stuck in place. So this does make me think that I'm going to paint the cliff next. I might even do that now, and then I'll be looking at using twisted wire and other things to do the branches, and maybe even to do the roots. Yeah, so I'll bring you along for that when I get to it. But I just wanted to share my thoughts, show you what I learned, and yeah, I will be back shortly on this build, I'm sure, with maybe some painting. So I have decided that I am going to put some paint on this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of my dark grey. I've just had a quick look again at the concept art, and it's a very light grey, the stone there. So if I start off with the darker grey that I use and paint that on thickly, and then I can highlight up from that using the progressively lighter greys and then onto white, then that will look correct. So we're just going to come along and with quite a wet brush, because this paint is now quite dry in the pot, I'm going to paint that all over. So I will pop some music on and you can watch this progress. Next job on this is the dry brush of the lighter grey, which I'm going to do using this brush, and I'm just going to do what I've started to do a little bit more, which is actually to take the worst of the paint or most of the paint off on the paint lid, which has been working really well for me recently. So we'll just put this over as a dry brush, and then we're going to be on to the complex bit, which is making the trees, which I have been thinking about. I have got ideas. I went out this morning and looked at what I think is a sagebrush, which has died in my garden, which I'm about to cut down and save all the bits for trees. But I couldn't see any in there that were a good proportion for this build. So it's going to be, I'm going to stick with what I said on my previous clip. You almost got me doing this, doing it with real trees, but I think I'm going to stick with what I said on the previous clip. So anyway, so we'll get this dry brushed. I'll stop talking now, put some music on, or skip ahead one or two, and then I'll bring you along once this is done and when I'm ready for the next step. Okay then, so what we have is the two elements that I'm going to use to build the core of the trunks for these two holly bushes. And I've been looking a bit closer at the image that I'm working from. And it does strike me that by making this the same scale as my Gandalf figure that I had, I've maybe kind of shortchanged myself a little bit. What might have been a better idea would have been to have not worried about it being the same scale, 28mm, done the doorway bigger, made it easier for my carving, and then made the trees bigger, because right now this is going to be quite a yeah, it's going to be a bit odd, because the trees start to actually grow out only about yay high up this this dowel. And yeah, so it might be a better idea to just change my scale up, but I'm where I am, and I did it for a reason, because I wanted to be able to sit some miniatures on here and have that as part of the diorama. So it is what it is. What we're going to do now is we're going to start to measure up, cut and put in place. So as I say, I have worked out, looking at the image, where this should be, and it is going to start to actually branch out. That's where the branches begin. And on the other side they're a little bit higher, but that's where the branches are about to begin. So if we look at these, you can see where those marks are. There's a lot of not used, which is good, because this is the last of this down. I've got more on order, but it won't come for ages because of Corona. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut those, and I'm going to then bring you along once I've done a little bit of experimenting and work out how I'm going to actually bush up the trees. My idea is to use potentially smaller gauge dowel as a core, so put that in there and then build around that with some twisted wire. That's the idea for that side. And this side, my idea is actually to cut and splay the cardboard a little bit, and then use twisted wire as well around those to build out the bush. So I have ideas. I'll bring you along as I get to them and show you how they work. But for now, yeah, it's good to be getting a little bit more progress. I've been very busy, so I've not been able to sit down at this for quite a long time. I've done some thinking, and I've realised that I just need to get stuck into this. I'm a little nervous about this task. I'm not 100% sure how it's going to work, but I have had some thoughts, and so I'm just going to give it a go. So as you can see, I've cut down my 2 lengths of material. So this is the balsa, and then here we have the inside roll from some kitchen roll, or maybe I don't know, tin foil. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to use twisted wire to build out the shape of a tree. So, and I've checked, and you can press the wire in nicely to certainly to the balsa. This will be maybe a little bit more complicated, but I'll come to that later, so I'll do the balsa first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a load of twisted wire that's going to branch out and allow me to branch out, and I'll be able to then stick it in, glue it in place, and then follow up with air dry clay, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the branches at the top and then bulk out the bottom and the tree roots with air dry clay. So I will get those twisted, and I'll bring you along for each stage as I get them. But first of all, I'm just going to sit and I'm just going to twist a bunch of branches for me to use in this way. So I'll bring you back when that's done. I've just been twisting and twisting for about an hour. You can't see them very well because of the background, but I now have a whole collection of trees. So what it'll let me do is actually pull this forwards. And what I'll do is I'll set them onto the blue so you can see them. So these are all going to be branches. And what these have, as you can see, is they all have the small single wire at the bottom, which I can then use to insert them into the soft balsa. And what I might end up doing after this is just using balsa for both trees, just because I think it's going to be slightly easier for me to actually put these armatures, as they call them, into that, rather than trying to work out a way of attaching them to the tube. And that is an hour's work. I think maybe I need twice that many for a 1 wood tree, so maybe that's a quarter of the way through. And my hands are green, and yeah, it's hard work, but I'm very pleased to be getting there and getting this done. I put it off all week. It's been nice. I've been sat watching some Rob Bennett videos while I've been doing it, and yeah, it's been a nice Saturday pre-lunch. I will probably carry on with this later on today, but I have chores to do now and other tasks. So that's my progress. I'll bring you back when I get a little bit more done. I've been doing a bit of experimenting with these armatures, as you can see, which I'm going to come to in a second and show you how I'm doing that. First of all, today I received something I'd ordered, which is absolutely fantastic. I did not think this was going to arrive in time, and I'm very, very pleased indeed that it has. So what you can see here is textured tentacles from CP Models, cpmodelsminiatures.co.uk, and yeah, they are going to be absolutely perfect. I will only need 1 of these, I think, maybe 2 at the most, not very many. The rest I'll probably make use of on some bases so that I can play the Watcher in the Water game, the scenario, which is pretty cool. So yeah, so they've arrived, so I'll get them painted up, and that will then sit next to the Watcher head, which will be sat in the water. However, to the main subject of this video, which is how I'm doing these armatures. So I am going to do both onto the wooden dowel, onto the balsa dowel. I think it's just going to be a bit easier to do, and it's going to end up with a better result and a nicer looking model. And as you saw, I have been twisting lots and lots of armatures. These are the lower armatures. I think I'm going to have to make some bigger ones as well, but for now I'm happy with these. They're giving me a chance to practice. And what I've decided to do on these, which is something I've not done before, but it is working quite well, even though it's quite expensive. I'm not sure if I do this on a tabletop gaming one, but I'm using green stuff to coat the actual twisted wire to give it the texture for the bark. So what we do is we get our green stuff, and I'm sure you've used green stuff before, but I'm going to show you how this works, just because I need to do some more on the trees, so I may as well be filming while I'm doing it. So we get our green stuff, we get a little slice of it, not a lot. Do this in small sections. One of the biggest issues I always have with green stuff is having too much. And then in this project I'm not going to have too much, because I've got loads and loads of these armatures to do, but often I end up with a load of green stuff that I don't need, and then I have to kind of find a use for it, which normally goes to filling in the holes in Games Workshop bases for horses, or putting a little bit of 3D into a base or something like that is where my spare green stuff normally goes. But anyway, I'm talking while I'm just kneading this in to make it into the nice green that you want. Okay, so once you've done that, keep your pot just within reach. It's just to the side there because you will need it. And what I'm then doing is I'm then tearing very, very tiny bits of the green stuff off and pressing it in place to fill in the gaps. Now, we don't need to be too worried about the base and the bottom, because when I do the next step, once all this is done for each of these armatures, there'll be either more green stuff or maybe air dry clay or something, or Luke's modelling compound that will be used for the main trunk and blending these into the main trunk. So don't worry too much about the scraggly bits at the bottom. But for the rest of the armature, what you're doing is you're wrapping the green stuff around it to hide the twisted wire. And it is actually literally that simple. And it's very quick. So it's a really good little technique. I prefer it to the wrapping with masking tape. I was recommended to find some I think it was electrical style tape to try, but I've not managed to find any of that here yet, so I've not given that a go, which is a shame, because this is, as I say, not the cheapest of options, I don't think, but the results are pretty good, and for what I'm attempting to achieve, I think this is the right technique to use. So I'm going to be doing this for 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 more armatures I've got twisted that have no green stuff on. Yeah, I'm going to be doing this for a couple of days. But that should be enough for all the trees that I need, or for both the trees, so for all the armatures I need, apart from, like I just said at the beginning, I think I need to make some much bigger armatures to project the trees. I've had another look at the artwork, and I think I need a few quite tall ones to kind of go out from the middle of the trunk and reach right up to the top of the diorama. So I might do those not with green stuff though. Anyway, I'm going to carry on. I'll stop talking and stop videoing. You've seen this enough. 5 minutes of me muttering is probably enough for anyone. If you've watched all of that, congratulations and thank you. I will be back when I have the next thing to show you on this build. I've managed to finish all the green stuffing. I did this mostly in breaks during the day, or while I was in meetings when I wasn't able to be typing, so I had to do something with my hands, so I just did this while I was listening and talking, and you can see that there's quite a lot of these made. Hopefully there's enough. There might even be too many, but what I now am going to do is I'm going to go and give them a prime with a brown paint. I won't bring you along for that because it's just going to be a rattle can, and I'm just going to stick them into some XPS, spray them maybe once, maybe twice, and I'll bring you back for the next step where there is to show you. But yes, it's worked very, very well with the green stuff. Even the older things, it's still flexible, so I can still reposition, as you can see, without causing any breaking, which is just perfect. It's very, very good. I'm actually very impressed. So I might end up buying myself a load more green stuff and use this as my technique for making trees, but who knows. I will now go and prime them, and I'll be back with this for the next step very shortly. And so we come to the next step for this. Finally, I've been doing some practicing and some playing around. As you can see, I've got a test piece here, the first tree, and what I'm going to be doing is, just so that I don't make any mistakes, I'm going to be practicing on that one and then following up by showing you what I've done. So I am going to be using all the same materials. I'm not going to be using the tube. I've decided to go for the balsa for both, so I've cut myself another length of balsa wood, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put on a base, so just a small base just down here, cover this wood not all the way up, maybe about a third of the way up with air dry clay, and then just leave it to dry. And the reason I'm doing that is so that when I'm working on this, it's a little bit easier for me to put down and it won't fall over as much, and other good things like that. So first of all, we get some PVA, some white glue, and we paint that around the base. And this is because, as you'll have heard me say on this channel a fair few times, clay is not adhesive. It does not stick on its own. So you need to provide some glue, else it will just come straight off. And then what we do is we take our air dry clay, this is DAS, and we take a bit and we just smudge it around the base, set it into a little bit of a cone coming out the bottom, which is a lovely messy job. Have a pot of water near, here's my paint water, so that you can guide it. And if you need to put some more PVA on, then don't be shy, get some more PVA on there. Make sure to keep the PVA, to get enough PVA that it's actually going to adhere, and then smudge it around and bring it out a little bit so that it's just going to be slightly flared at the bottom, and then leave that to dry. And that's this stage. So it's a very quick process, this, but once this is done, then we can move on to the meat of the project, which is putting the branches in, which is going quite well on my test piece, and then we will go to actually sculpting the trunk and putting the rest of the body of the trunk on. So there we are. That there will give it just a little bit more stability for when it's got the branches on top, and will also feed into the root system even when we get to that at some point in the future. When I say at some point in the future, it's got to be this week, because I need to finish this week. So there we are. So I'll let that dry and I'll bring you back for the next step. That stands up nicely now. Oh, you can't see. Let me put it down over here. See, that stands up nicely. Good. The next step for this is to start to arrange the actual the foliage. So as you can see, here I have the tree branches that I made using the twisted wire and the green stuff. And so what I'm going to do basically is as simple as this. I'm going to dip the wire into some PVA, and then push it in like that. And there we are. There we have. And it's not very stable, as you can see. Even with the base that I've put on it, it's not very stable. You're going to have to keep hold of it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to basically go through all of the, well, not all of the rest of them, because I think I've got too many, and I might put some more onto the other one that I'm practicing on. I know, it's cheating really, isn't it, practicing? But yeah, so I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to stick these branches to the top, just like you're seeing here. So there we are. You see, this one's designed to go in the middle because it's got nothing. It's got no sticky out bits until it gets to the top. So I'm just going to do it like that. So I'll do the rest of that off camera because it's basically the same thing repeated, and I'll bring you back when I get to the next step. You are listening to a very frustrated and annoyed beard because I've just tried to use the airbrush, and it turns out that I really can't at this stage get it to work, and I'm under too many time constraints to faff around for as long as I did the last time I tried to use it. So I'm just going to hairy stick, and guess what, it's just working. So for now, toys are firmly out the pram, and I am giving up on the airbrush. I will have to put more time into it when I have the time to dedicate to practice. As the person said who commented on my last video, "Can't believe you're still that rubbish, surely you should be better." Well, this is obviously the case. Surely I should be better, and I also can't believe I'm that rubbish. But hey, I just don't have time to spend a long time every evening practicing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into mothballs, clean it correctly, make sure it's entirely perfect, put it back in its box so that it doesn't get damaged with dust, and come back to it at some point when I can dedicate the time. So anyway, as I was nattering, you can see here that what I've done is I have primed the tentacle, which is going to go on the Durin's door, which is brilliant. So yeah, anyway, never mind, didn't want to be an airbrusher anyway. Now for the bit that we've all been waiting for. Not just you, I've been waiting for it as well. So I have my bright aqua Aquarius glow-in-the-dark paint, and I also have a pot of cocktail sticks, because that is how I am going to apply it. I don't know how much of this I'm going to get on camera because it's probably going to be a little bit fiddly, and I may get in the way quite a lot. However, I thought I'd at least bring you along for a little bit of it, and then maybe I will be able to show you what it looks like when it's done. So basically, I don't want to be painting it like I did it that first time in that practice one, which, as awesome as it looked, it was way too much. It was all over it. So what I've decided to do is come in like this with a toothpick and paint or apply it quite thickly, but just in the little lines that I've carved in. So I'm going to get this done. It's not going to be a very quick process, as you can see. It's quite a thick paint, which doesn't really want to transfer very easily. However, slowly but surely is the way here. I don't want to feel like I'm in any rush. So I'll leave the camera running maybe put some music on, and you can watch as I get this done. Now I might even do this over more than one evening because it's quite late now, and while I'm actually not feeling all that tired, I'll regret staying up till the early hours if I do. So I may stop this. I may just do a little bit now and a little bit more tomorrow, a little bit the next day, because this is really important to get this right. This is the nuts of the idea. Alright, put some music on, stop rambling, let's get this done. Well then, I think that's good enough for now. I've actually managed to do it all, which is really, really cool. So I'm going to let that to dry, and then I'll check it out tomorrow to see how well it looks with the glow. Well, maybe actually I can quickly turn the lights off and see what happens. So maybe I'll just do that. So very, very minimally you can see some glow there. So that might need to have a second application, but it's starting, it's getting there. Time to do another application of the glow-in-the-dark paint. I won't run the camera for while I'm doing this. I'll use exactly the same technique. I'll get myself my cocktail stick and I will just very, very carefully run it in through the cracks. I'm probably going to do 3 or 4 applications, so I will just come back again when I've done that and I'll tell you how many I end up doing, because this will just be a little bit repetitive if I say, oh, I'm about to do it again. So yeah, onwards and upwards. This is now starting to really roll towards completion. Next up, for these trees, I'm going to build up the rest of the trunk. So I'll do this as well with the air drying clay that you can see at the back here. So what I've got is I've got a pot of water, I've got some PVA glue, and I've got some air drying clay, and we're going to use the same technique roughly. We're going to put the PVA on, but this time we're also going to be going in between the trunks. So this is going to give us a little bit more strength of how where these branches went into the wood. So I will start doing that and run the camera, and then when I get to an interesting point I'll explain a little bit more what I'm going to do, because it's more than just putting the air dry clay on. So let's just get that built up and then I'll be back in a minute. So I'll pop some music on for you. Now, the reason I wash my hands is I'm now going to have this tool, which is a pretty standard tool for carving in clay. So it's a sculptor's tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this down, and if you did notice that I did actually put more clay around the base as well, this is both to increase the stability, because we've now made this a little bit more top heavy, but also so that we can do this scraping, the striations, stripes. Try and keep my hand out of the way of the camera, it's quite hard with where I've set it, which is a bit silly. Maybe I could do this left-handed. How about I show off how ambidextrous I am or not? But anyway, yeah, so what we're looking at doing is we're looking at putting in the lines and the stripes that are going to give the texture to the bark, and it's as simple as this. So yeah, you could do this with your strong hand. You don't have to do it left-handed like I am if you're right-handed, but it's going alright because it wants to be a bit messy. You're looking at making this look like a really gnarled old tree, and there we are, simple as that. We now have a gnarled old tree. I'm actually going to make use of that little bit I pulled off just to strengthen that there. Push down in there. Just make sure that you're packing it in as well, because this is actually, like I've said, acting as a little bit of extra support for the branches. So now that's there, I'm going to leave that to dry overnight, and I'll bring you back for the next step, which is going to be probably painting, maybe foliage, I'm not sure. We'll see. Anyway, there we are, that's the trunk. Now I need to paint the trees, and I'm ummed and ahed a little bit, and I've realised that by having these done with the soft wood of balsa wood, it means that I can stick a cocktail stick in the bottom and then pin them to some polystyrene, and I've got a ready-made place for them to dry when I've painted them. I'm going to be using my raw umber initially from Winsor & Newton, which, if you've watched other videos of mine, you'll know I've managed to clog the bit where you actually get the paint out of, but that's fine because I normally use the lid as a makeshift wet palette or dry palette anyway, which is probably why it's clogged. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come along and I'm going to paint that all over. Now this is definitely not the colour it's going to end up, it's way too dark, but it's going to be a very good colour to start with, and I'm going to paint it on all over everything, including the branches that I'd already painted in the kind of reddy brown. The reason I primed the original branches was so that if I miss anything it didn't matter, because I knew that these were going to be quite closely packed, and as you can see they really are. So I'll get that done. I will pop some music on or skip ahead or something, but once this is painted then we'll come back and we'll add some more colours to it, and I'll bring you along for that step as well. So onwards. So there we are. I'll let that to dry and maybe come back and have to touch up a few areas, which maybe the white will still be showing through. And when that's ready and done, I'll come back and show you the next colour I'm going to put on, because in the picture these are actually quite light coloured. Though if you look at this how it is now, if you were trying to do a oak or something which is supposed to be a dark wood, that is working out really, really nicely. It'll be even better when it's dried. So I'm really quite pleased with that. So hopefully this is going to work out better again than I thought it would. It's been a little while since I've got back to this, but it's not far off completed, so I'm going to just try and push through it. So you can see that it's already looking really nice, the bark. What I've got is I've got this mustardy type colour, which I'm just going to come in and just very, very lightly I'm going to draw that down and across just to bring out some more highlights and add a little bit more colour to it. Now I don't need to do too much because the diorama is actually quite monochrome, so putting too much on would actually break it a little bit and make it less good. However, just what I'm doing now is going to be enough, just a very light dry brush, potentially up into the branches as well. Next thing will be to put some leaves on it, and then I'll be putting it actually in place and then working on the branches. So there's that. Let's next up, let's do some leaves. So I've just been looking at the picture that I'm building from, the concept art, and actually I've realised that they shouldn't have any foliage. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be putting my trees in place so that they can dry, they can be glued in place, and then I can build up the root structure. So how I'm doing that is I've got the same peg as I always had, so the cocktail stick which I used to just hold it in place while I was painting it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Bradle to put a little bit of a hole through, just like this. There we are. Then we'll pop some PVA on that hole. and then we'll put a bit of PVA around the edge, and I probably will need to come in with a little bit of air dry clay, which I'll do off camera, because yeah, just to kind of fill that gap and wedge it and make it so that it dries in the correct direction that I want it to, so not leaning too far forwards, because it's a little bit uneven. But that's how I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some air dry clay, and I'm going to come in and just build up a little bit around the base like that. Then and then I'll do the other side as well. I'll do the same thing on that one, and then I'll bring you back when that's done, so we can do the root systems. So here I am, just using some red clay because it's what I had to hand quickly. It's all going to be covered over with the white clay so that it all dries and looks the same when it's painted. But just wedging it in underneath, as you can see, just to give it that little bit more security. And I'll also come in with some PVA just around the bases. I need to refill this bottle just so that it's got some adherence, because I never tire of saying, don't forget, clay does not have any stickiness. So if you don't put glue in, it will dry and then it will come apart. So don't forget to put glue in. So yes, I'm just going to do that around this one and then around that one. Look, still got some glue in there already, but just put a little bit more. And then we'll pull that up. And then when this is all dry, which probably won't be until either later today or sometime tomorrow, then I can come in and start to do the roots. And also think about how I'm going to do the, well, I know how I'm going to do it, but start to do the water. And then we're really close to finish, which is very, very exciting. This is looking lovely. I'm really, really pleased with how this is. So there we are. Trees have been planted. Let's let that dry, and I'll bring you back in for the next step when I get to it. So I'm back at this, and now what I'm going to do is work on the root systems. So the root systems are going to come in, and I've been looking at the drawing that I'm working from, the concept art, which might flash up on screen now if I remember to. But basically, it's quite a solid lump. It comes out away from the trunk, and then is very, very twisted as it goes down and into the water. So I think I might be doing this a slightly different way. I was considering doing this by rolling like sausages and doing actual roots. What I'm actually going to do, I think, is get my air dry clay. I've got some PVA glue here, and I've got a plate, so and my brush, so I can keep my hands from getting too dirty. And I will put the air dry clay just as a big lump coming down towards the water, and then I'll make use of these or maybe any other sculpting tools as I find I need them, just to kind of build up the shape that I see on the drawing. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to pop some music on and just record this. It might take me some time, so I might skip some of it. But I'll just let you watch and see how it goes, and I'll do first this side, and then I'll turn the board round and I'll do that side, because it's a bit easier for me to reach with this side on. I'm actually filming from a slightly different angle here. So hopefully this will work well, and hopefully you'll enjoy watching it, and I will speak to you again when I've done at least one tree and the roots for it. Okay, I'm relatively happy with that. That took about 5 minutes of crafting, which isn't too bad, quicker than I expected. I'm now going to rotate the board and work on the other side, but I probably won't film that because it'll be basically the same thing. I'll let that dry and then bring it back and show you me when it's painting time. So we're getting closer to completion. Very, very exciting. Next up, we're going to paint the roots, because this is now nice and dry. It's been left overnight. I'm pretty happy how they're looking. So what I've got is, I've got just a old brush and the raw umber from Newton and Windsor, and so I'm just going to quickly paint that over in exactly the same way as I did for the rest of the trunk. And when that's done, I'll leave that to dry, and then I'll come back in and I'll dry brush it again with the same kind of mustardy colour, and then we're ready for the water, which is a bit I've been looking forward to the most in this whole build. Actually, no, probably the glowing paint was the thing that excited me the most, but the water's very, very close. So we'll get the watcher done and then put the water around it. So I will finish painting this. As you can see, it's not really a very revolutionary technique. And I will bring you back for the dry brush a bit later on today, because yeah, running out of time, as I often do. These really are starting to look really good. However, I am not happy with that root system. Let me just quickly change the angle of the camera slightly and zoom in, and I'll show you what I mean. If you look at the base, the root of the trunk here, you can see it's quite a dramatic transition. I didn't really get that smooth enough. But also, there just aren't any roots. I mean, it looks okay, but I think that I need to, on top of that, do some sausages of air dry clay, which can then be actually twisting and rotating and curling over the top of the actual underneath, which looks like just a deeper root system. So what I'm going to do is, just off camera, so I'll come into shot, so I'm going to make myself some sausages. So let's get that done. Right, so there we are. Expertly shot there, Beard. Well done. So I'm going to make some sausages, and I'm going to put them on. And then when they're dry, I'll get some. I'm not going to do this like completely live, because I need to kind of get a little bit closer in than I can with the camera as I've got it set up. I might point it down actually, so you can watch and put some music on. But I'll get some PVA, stick them in place, and then they can actually go over the top of each other and build up that 3D, which is what I need. So I'm going to do that. I may very well point the camera down, I may not. You'll know very shortly, and so will I. So these are looking a lot better now. I'm very happy with that. I'll let that dry and then come in and paint it and dry brush it. So to just get a little bit ahead rather than just waiting, what I'm doing now, if I just pan down, is you can see that I've got the, I'm going to start doing the watcher now. So this is a tentacle which I bought from eBay, and I've just primed it and put one colour on it, so I think I'm probably going to do a little more to it, but I'm not sure. It's looking quite nice even with just that one colour. I might just do a little bit of a dry brush and a light wash actually to recess into with the light into the recess. And I've got a lump here of air dry clay, and I'm looking at the actual drawing that I've got, and I think that I might actually be able to get away with just using air dry clay for this. I was thinking about trying to sculpt it using some other materials, but I think air dry clay is going to be enough. So what I might do now is actually put this in place, sculpt it and glue it and let it dry as well at the same time as the roots are drying, which are just up there. And then I can come back to this, build up the water around it, and I'll stick that in at the end once the water's done, because I don't want to spoil the paint job on that, and then I'll paint this finally. That's what I think I'm going to do. So I'm going to fettle around with that now for a bit with some sculpting tools, get it to a shape I like, and then glue it down, and I'll bring you back to show what it looks like. As you can see, the watcher's body is now done in the air dry clay with all the lumps and bumps, and I'll be able to paint that up really nicely, so I'm very pleased with that. What I've got to do now is paint up the roots. So I've got my raw umber, and I'm going to paint over exactly the same way as I did before. So I will just get that done. I will move the camera very slightly so that I don't get in the way when I'm painting. Actually, I'm going to be okay, so I'll just crack on with it and take a minute or so, and then when that's all done, I'll be able to dry brush it and then move on to the water, which what I'm really looking forward to. So yeah, just quickly come in here and paint those roots, and that is looking much better, much more what I was aiming for with that kind of twisted look that the original had. So yeah, good. Getting closer with this now. I can almost taste the completion. I will come back when this is done and when I am about to start doing the dry brushing later on today. And now for a process that I've been looking forward to for a very long time, and actually kind of influenced me in doing this, even though the artwork obviously is superb. I'm not going to claim to be the originator of this idea. This is absolutely inspired, 100%, and inspired is the correct word, by an amazing YouTuber called Marklin of Sweden, who I absolutely love. I do not miss any of his videos if I can help it. He is a joy to watch and inspiring and wonderful, and if you don't yet subscribe to him, then you absolutely should. So go away and do it. I'll wait. I hope you've gone and done it. I'll wait a bit longer. Have you subscribed yet? If you haven't, please go and do it. He's brilliant. Anyway, this, I don't know whether he came up with it. He probably didn't. But this technique for making water uses terrain glue and toilet paper. And that's it. So I'll show you the process, or you can watch his video, which is probably going to be far better than mine. But there we are. Let's get that open. So what we're going to do is you put your PVA down on the surface, and it can be any surface you want. You put your terrain glue down, so watered down PVA, nice and thick. So I'll get this whole thing covered. I might even get a bigger brush, because this might take some time with this small brush. So yep, I will get that done and then be back in a second. Okay, so once you've done that, and you've covered your whole area with the PVA, what you do is you start to lay your toilet paper on top. And then as you're laying your toilet paper on the top, you're going to soak it with the PVA, like so. So I will get that done, and then be back in a second. What we then do is we build up several more layers. So I'm going to get that done without rolling the camera, because this is just going to get quite repetitive. So I'm going to do 2 or 3 more layers, and then I'll bring you back when I'm ready for the next step. I've done a few layers since while I've been not filming, and what I'm now going to be doing is putting the texture on. So I'm going to be using a little bit of my finger just to smooth out, and I'm working to the drawing that I've got that is on my computer screen, which is over behind me. But I can easily come in and put some more PVA on, and I can even add some more of the toilet paper if I wish. And what we want to do here is, this is where we put either waves or in this case the ripples. His video is all about doing this for a sea, but obviously this is going to be a lake which is has the watcher coming out here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to actually build up like this the ripples, because what happens is there's ripples coming out away from where the watcher is, like this. And that actually is a really simple thing to do. So we just push away in that way from where you want the ripples to go. And there we are, we have a ripple out around where the watcher is. And the tentacle will be able to sit nicely here, and that'll be fine. So now we're going to do the next step, next stage out. And we're just going to put a ripple coming out, like this. So now we've got 2 ripples. And then we're just going to do little ripples coming out from there, like this. Just pushing, try to obliterate the edges of all of the toilet rolls, but just pushing like this. And you can see that here you've got the effect that we're looking for. And then harder is going to be, because I want it to actually be quite smooth up this end. So I might need some more PVA just to break those edges up. There we are. So we're going to do nice and smooth coming up towards the shoreline with just the smallest of ripples. So let's try and smooth all those out first. And then we'll leave this to dry. So once I've got this to a ripple state I'm happy with, it will leave left to dry overnight, and then I'll come in and start painting it tomorrow. But people have just asked me on the Discord to give a review of this process. I saw this years ago when I first started looking into doing terrain, which was from a model railway, not for wargaming or for anything like this. Didn't even consider doing stuff for Tolkien, even though I loved the books. And this was one of the early videos I saw that I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I have always wanted to give it a proper try like this, but I've never had the opportunity really, and that is wonderful. I mean, look at that. That took no time. You've just watched me. It's been 3 minutes, and it was probably 20 minutes tops putting down the toilet paper. That's really good. I'm very, very impressed. So I think that's done. I'm going to leave that to dry, and I will bring you back in for the next step when we're going to be painting it, which is going to look amazing as well. Oh, can't wait. I'm so pleased with that. That does look brilliant. I've had this sat in the sun all day and it's dried, and I'm very, very pleased with how it's looking. It's maybe a little bit more wrinkled than I wanted to, but for a first attempt ever at the technique, I'm really happy, and it certainly looks very much like what I wanted it to, with some smaller ripples here and then the bigger ripples coming from where the monster's going to be coming out, and that's where the tentacle will be when I stick it in place. So what I'm now going to do is start to paint, and the way that it is it's quite dark along the edges, and then it has a strip down here going towards where that is, kind of widening out, which is quite light. So I'm going to start from the edges, and I'm going to have a little bit of black on my wet dry palette, which I've got here, and I'm just going to start painting and see how it works. So we will get a little bit of black paint onto my palette, and we're just going to wet blend all this across, going towards the light in the middle. And the good thing is that this is quite light already, so I can probably leave that quite a lot and then come back in with some I'll put black paint all over it now, but never mind. Come back into that with some white paint afterwards. So we're just going to get started. We're just going to start on the edges with a bit of black. And then, funnily enough, the next colour is blue. So I'm going to make use of the lid for this as a palette. Come in with a different brush. And this is just very gentle, so this is going to be quite hard to do. This is almost going to be blending in, and I'm going to come back over, I think, with the black just to do a little bit more blending. But it's almost like this. We're going to blend the black in and just give a hint of the blue like this, and we'll come in multiple times, multiple colours, and blend this all together. And then what we're going to do is we're going to keep coming across like this, just to put these colours in and keep blending them into this paler centre, which I'll do with white and with the third brush. And I think that effect should capture pretty much what I'm seeing, because as luck would have it, the toilet paper is actually dried in a very suitable colour. That was a bit stupid there, but I can save that. There's some more. There we are. So we'll just dry brush over the whole lot so that we get some texture. And then what we'll do is we'll come in with the white, which I'll need to grab because I don't have it to hand. And so give me 1 second. So I've got my white. It's actually a brand new pot. The other one went off. So let's move that out of the way. Get the final white brush. I'm actually going to put that over here so that I don't contaminate the pot, because I don't want to do that. And then what we're doing is we'll be doing this. Oh, my phone. I have a call coming through from someone. There we are. I think that looks absolutely wonderful. I'm very, very pleased with that. So I think the next thing that I'm going to do is let that to dry. The final thing that I actually have to do on this build is paint the Watcher here and stick his arms on, stick his tentacle on. So, but I'm going to leave that to dry first, because I'm not totally sure if I'm not going to come back and do a little bit more, but that won't take very long to dry. And then I'm done. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? That really has turned out well. Time for the final couple of touches. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with the fresh brush. I've left this for quite a long time to dry, and I'm coming in with white paint, and I'm going to fill in so that this line here has a much whiter line coming down towards it, because that's what I see on the picture. And it was just a little bit grey, the toilet paper being a good colour but not quite right. So we're just going to bring it along like this and lighten it up a little bit. Oops. And it's quite dry. I'm using the top of the paintbrush lid as a palette, and there's a load that was already on there when I opened this new pot. So there we are. You can see the light is coming from over here and then coming down towards where the watcher is, and a little bit around behind as well. That's a lot better. There we are, the watcher. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same paintbrush as I just used, which has white on it, and I'm going to pop some of the dark sea blue from Vallejo, and I'm going to paint that over, and I'm going to allow it to naturally lighten slightly with the white paint that was already on the brush. This is obviously craft paint going straight onto air dry clay, so it will dry almost instantly. What I might find is that I need to darken that up a little bit just to give it a little more contrast now that it's against the sea. But I will, once I've done this, I will get another fresh brush and I will put more colour to the sea around it, because there's quite a lot of the toilet paper grey there, which isn't really ideal. So there we are, there's the watcher done. So I might want to put a wash on that, I'm not sure, I'll think about that. So now what I'll do is I'll get a fresh brush and I will dry brush a little bit more. So I'm going to get a smaller brush and dry brush around the watcher. So and there we are, the watcher in the water. So the final step for this, unless I do decide to do the shading, is to get a little bit of PVA, the tentacle, which is going to sit in just about there, I think. So what we'll do is we'll put some PVA in, and we'll push that right in. There we are. The final touch is done. Well, there you are. What an absolutely epic build. I had so much fun doing that, and I am so stoked by the outcome. I'm going to cut to some pictures I've just taken in the dark, showing the glowing in the dark paint, which has really worked well while I just do this outro, because I've taken so many pictures it will just go on at the end if I don't cut to them. I'd like to thank Ryan from the Tabletop Crafters United Discord for picking this subject, which was build something based on some concept art. And obviously I'd like to thank Angela for picking this amazing concept art, which has inspired me so much for this build. I really have enjoyed it. It's been a great fun build. And if you've made it this far, well, congratulations. I'm impressed with you for making it this far and joining me at the end for this outro. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. I'd love to hear from you if you have made it this far, and if you have learned, and if you are impressed or not, or if you think I should have done something differently. But yeah, thank you for watching. I will wrap up now and leave the pictures running, and I will thank you very much for watching, and please stay healthy, stay safe, and stay well.